They tried to shut them up.
There's no guarantee to free speech.
They tried to cancel them.
Deplatforming works.
They even threw them in jail.
Peter Navarro,
Steve Bannon,
now in prison.
But they couldn't stop them.
It's not a prison bill that will ever shut me up.
They call them rebels.
Basket of deplorables.
They call them rogues.
They claim to guns or religion.
And they say they're outlaws.
These are the kind of guys you like to smack in the ass.
War Room presents Rebels, Rogues, and Outlaws.
You set out to take Vienna. Take Vienna!
The national bestseller by longtime Bannon producer Dan Fluette. Take a journey through the pictorial history of War Room. In a culture that celebrates the weak, show your support by standing with the rebels. Go to doitfluette.com or scan the QR code on your screen. Use the code RAV20 for 20% off your order. Stand with the rebels and never back down.
Good evening, America. Welcome to the Thursday edition of Just the News, No Noise. Look at that. I got my days mixed up. I'm your host, John Solomon, and that I'm sure of. And I'm joining you from Washington, D.C. at the wiredtofishcoffee.com studios. Wired to Fish Coffee, you know this is the official coffee of Just the News. And you can go right now to wired2fishcoffee.com and get a fantastic 10% discount on all of their great blends, their great mugs, the Just the News mug. Go get some Just the News bling. All you got to do is use the promo code JustNews at checkout. You get 10%, or you can point your camera at that QR code. That's another easy way to do it. All right. We've seen President Trump's foreign policy start paying dividends in recent weeks. For example, a ceasefire in Ukraine is closer than ever to becoming a reality after the president spoke with the leaders of both Russia and Ukraine this week. There's still a number of steps to get through before even a partial ceasefire is reached, but we now know the two sides are at least open to it. And in the Middle East, the president, his team, and their allies are working to get Americans held hostage in that region home, and they secured the release today of another American. In a story Just the News broke, the Trump administration and its negotiators, alongside our allies from Qatar, were able to secure the release of American hostage Glenn Glesman from the Taliban. He was taken by the group while traveling through the Middle East as a tourist in 2022. He's been in captivity for nearly 3 years. The president and his team had previously secured the release of two other Americans from Taliban custody, Ryan Corbett and William McKenty. We'll have much more on this story in just a few minutes because we'll be joined by a Qatari spokesman to explain the role they played in this hostage release. And shortly before the show went on air tonight, President Trump signed an executive order to begin closing the Department of Education. Here's the president's explanation why he's doing it.
We're going to be returning education very simply back to the states where it belongs, and this is a very popular thing to do, but much more importantly, it's a common sense thing to do, and it's going to work. Absolutely, it's going to work, and I can tell you from dealing with the governors and others in the state, they want it so badly. They want to take their children back and really teach their children individually. Probably the cost will be half, and the education will be maybe many, many times better.
Common sense. We heard that a lot lately, and in fact, you're beginning to see Americans describe what's going on in Washington as common sense. That's a word I think we're going to hear a lot more of as the Trump administration and the 47th presidency unfolds. Now, in the room when the president made that signature on the executive order and explained what he was doing was our very own and my amazing co-host, Amanda Head. Amanda, pretty big moment.
Yes.
Another promise delivered, right?
Absolutely. Another one in the victory column. He told us exactly why he is looking to close the Department of Education and return its powers back to the states. And it's really kind of hard to argue with what he had to say once you hear this. Check it out.
After 45 years, the United States spends more money on education by far than any other country, and spends likewise by far more money per pupil than any country, and it's not even close. But yet we rank near the bottom of the list in terms of success. It's an amazing stat. Those are two stats you don't want. The most money spent per pupil, and you're at the bottom of the list. 70% of 8th graders are not proficient in either reading or in math. 70%. 40% of 4th graders lack even basic reading skills, can't read.
damning statistics, and it really leads you to wonder, what is the Department of Education good for other than investing in a DEI agenda? Those results indicate that it really hasn't been helping American students for a long time now. And turning now to congressional leadership here in Washington, D.C., we were talking a little bit about this last night with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. Congresswoman and former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi jabbed him a little bit for caving in and not standing in the way of the Republican-led CR. And we also had the news of the first congressional Democrat calling for a change of leadership in the Senate. Maryland Congressman Glenn Ivey went on record to say Senator Schumer should step down. Well, Schumer was also on PBS earlier, and he revealed a little bit about the current Democrat operation. And I don't entirely know if he divulged a little too much or not, but take a listen. You be the judge.
We are mobilizing in New York. We have people going to the Republican districts and going after these Republicans who are voting for this and forcing them to either change their vote or face the consequences.
Yeah, so I don't know. It sounds like a whole lot more excuse making, and that's what we've been hearing from a lot of Democrats. And yet the approval rating, John, for President Trump, I believe it was at 49% today, which is the highest it has ever been in either one of his terms.
Yeah, no, there's a lot going on in terms of success. And I think, today the Education Department's a checklist thing.
Yep.
But earlier in the day, when you bring home a hostage who's been on the ground for 3 years in captivity of Taliban, that's not exactly on the list, so he, always is at a priority. But he surprises us from all different directions. And I think one of the things that we're beginning to understand as we look at the Russia-Ukraine negotiations, as we look at what went on with the Taliban today, and what we looked at not too long ago with Israel and Hamas, Qatar, a longtime ally in the Middle East, it's a tiny country, but it has a long shadow of diplomacy. Yeah. It's helping us in so many different ways right now. I know in a second we're going to turn to one of the chief advisors to the Qatari Prime Minister to explain what happened. But Qatar, keep an eye on what's going on there. Earlier in the year, they were getting children back from Russia that had been kidnapped from Ukraine and exchanging Russians who were kidnapped by Ukraine. They're making bridges all across the country now, and I think that all across the world. And they're going to be one of the secret sauces, I think, to the Trump administration's negotiating strategy. They've done so much already. All right, as we promised, joining me now, all the way from Doha, the capital of Qatar, the advisor to the Qatari Prime Minister and the chief spokesman, Dr. Majed al-Ansari. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi, John, Amanda. Very nice to be with you again.
It is good to have you on, sir. What a great honor. This is another major victory, obviously, for the Trump administration. But again, Qatar in the background doing really important diplomatic work. Don't get a lot of credit until something like this happens. But every day you guys are playing a role. Tell us how this Taliban release came to be.
Well, John, we've been working on this for so many months now. This is the process that ended up with Corbett and McKenty being home with their families, and we continued working with the interim government in Afghanistan and with the administration in Washington. And since President Trump came to power, we told, hey, let's see what we can do to bring George back home to his family also. And we started immediately working on that, talking to the interim government. We, this administration is brave enough, it's bold enough to take the necessary decision. They said, listen, we're willing to talk directly to the Taliban to get George back home, and this is exactly what happened. Adam was here in Doha, and he made the meetings, and then we went immediately to Kabul on a Qatari airplane, where our diplomats were ready to facilitate the meeting between the envoy and the interim government, and he met with the foreign minister over there, and he discussed with him. The discussion, took a lot of issues on how to work together for the benefit of the American people and the Afghan people. And obviously, as soon as the meetings ended, George was shaking hands with Adam, hugging staff from both the U.S. and the Qatari side, and immediately got on the plane, where two physicians were on our medical team were waiting for him on the plane. They immediately checked his health, checked his vitals, and we were very happy to report that he was in good health when he got on the plane. He came here to Doha, where he is now on a flight to the United States. Hopefully within 10 to 14 hours, he'll be reunited with Alexandra after 2 years. 2 years lost for that family that we hope they can regain now.
Yeah.
Amazing.
That's going to be another amazing moment here in Washington. Sir, he's been gone for over 2 years. I have to imagine that this could have happened sooner, but maybe it couldn't. Why didn't this happen under Joe Biden? Was there a way without the will? Why not?
I mean, I don't want to talk about the previous administration, but what I can tell you about this administration and our engagement with this, it's the level of boldness, it's the decisiveness, and it's the readiness to be open, to be engaging on these issues, as we have seen, with Adam Boehler meeting with the interim government and saying to them, hey, let's talk it over, let's see what we have to discuss. And this is why we have this grand gesture now with the interim government basically releasing George as a show of good faith in dealing with the Trump administration. And this is what decisiveness gets you. It gets you results.
Yeah. Now, also, it helps to have an ally that's always working in the region for us and trying to get these things done. I don't think Americans realize how much Qatar is involved in right now. They're involved in the Russia-Ukraine matter, certainly even creating goodwill between two countries that are warring by the exchange of children. You were at the table all the way through the Hamas negotiations and getting many of those hostages released. Can you bring us up to speed? Obviously, the hostilities resumed this week. I know people are frustrated, but tell us where things stand. Is there the potential for another ceasefire, or has that moment moved past us?
John, Amanda, we've been working on, right now, actually, as we speak, we're working on 10 different mediations. We just had the presidents of Rwanda and the DRC in Doha for the first meeting between the two leaders since the crisis over there. As you said, we're working on Russia-Ukraine, we're working on Hamas-Israel. All of these mediations, some of them you hear about, some of them you don't. Take a lot of toll in our machine here, but we're committed to it. And certainly, foremost is the war in Gaza and the situation over there. Since the hostilities have begun, again, we have reports of more than 500 people being killed in Gaza. This is a number that we do not want to see. This is a number that we cannot even fathom the need for right now. And this is why within the very difficult situation we have right now, we're continuing to engage. Our Prime Minister was on the phone today with the Egyptian Foreign Minister, and they agreed and said in their communique very clearly that we will continue working on this and finding avenues of peace. This is not an easy conflict to mediate. Tensions are very high on both sides. There is a complete loss of trust on both sides. We were able, with the help of the President Trump administration, to get the ceasefire in place. It lasted for more than 40 days, but we need to go back now to the drawing table and find the right formula. We, of course, urge both parties to go back to the agreement that was signed, but we will not continue in, finding innovative ways of getting back to the negotiation table and making both sides agree to another ceasefire that will hopefully lead to an end to this war.
Sir, when President Trump took office the first time, a lot of his naysayers said he's a businessman, he knows nothing about diplomacy and foreign policy, he's going to start World War III, and all of these criticisms against him. And yet we saw the Abraham Accords, something that was so historic in that region. And I want to ask you, from your perspective in Qatar, for his second term this time around, I know a lot of people obviously want to see an expansion of the Abraham Accords. Where do you see more opportunities for that to happen?
Amanda, we've always seen President Trump as a decision maker. We've always seen him as a pragmatic leader, and we've always seen him as a deal maker. And it's just the same with His Highness the Emir over here. Both men are deal makers, both men are pragmatic, and both men are decisive. And this is why during the first Trump administration, we had the end of the longest war in U.S. history in Afghanistan through the mediation of Qatar, and now we had the ceasefire even before President Trump came into the White House for this term. He was able to bring through that deal, and this is why we have great trust in the administration that will help us in getting a lot of these deals across. I think one of the main things we have to say right now is that our region in the Middle East, and not only our region, if you look at the world today, if you put your one finger on the Atlantic Ocean, another finger on the Pacific Ocean, anything in between is probably conflict one way or the other. There's a failure of the central state. There are the conflicts, internal and external, all around the world. There's a lot that needs to be done, and I think one of the main things right now is to stop and put a cap on the conflicts that have taken so many lives right now. The situation in Gaza, situation in Ukraine, situation in Sudan, situation in Yemen, in Libya and other places. And we are hoping that with the Trump administration, we can start, putting on the victory column, as you just said about local politics, Amanda, a lot of these conflicts as done, dusted, and ready to start with reconstruction and getting people's lives together. And this is something we believe that we can do in partnership with the United States.
Yeah, and you have already done. I mean, the record is clear.
Yeah.
So I want to ask one last question, because a lot of people probably don't know the role that you played in lessening hostilities and opening the door for Ukraine and Russia, maybe to get a peace deal with President Trump. And it began with the exchange of children back in the, I think, November, December holiday time frame here in America. You guys are at the table regularly between two countries. What is your assessment of where these talks go? Is there a chance for a ceasefire or a limited ceasefire in the days ahead?
No, obviously, John, we've been working on this issue for a very long time. From even the first couple of days when this happened, our Prime Minister was in Moscow, extending a hand of a mediator and saying, listen, we're ready to mediate whenever there is a chance for it. We were part of the grain deal when it happened, and we have reunited countless Ukrainian children with their families as a result of our mediation over there. We are working on the energy issue right now and securing the energy industries in both countries. We are seeing the momentum that's taking place in next door in Saudi Arabia. We have issued a statement welcoming these efforts and hoping for these efforts to succeed. And we are working with the leaders right now. We have high-level visits coming up to help push forward a deal, and we really believe in the momentum that was created, and we believe that there is a chance for this conflict, one of the longest lasting right now, that we have seen to end through U.S. decisiveness and international cooperation from countries like Qatar, with working together with the Russians and the Ukrainians to see an end to it.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Majed al-Ansari, I want to tell you there are a lot of grateful Americans for what your country did to bring one of our fellow countrymen home today. I know we're going to get an opportunity maybe to see the Prime Minister of Qatar in Washington soon. We'll be looking forward to that. Hopefully you'll be here. We'll get you in person. But thank you so much for giving this very important update today. Great honor to have you on the show.
Thank you very much for having me, John.
Thank you, so. Yeah, that was great. Very good. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, Congressman Tim Burchett and I spent some time earlier today when Amanda was over at the White House. He's got some interesting ideas, including he has a bill to address that Taliban. He wants to cut off the U.S. taxpayer funding to the Taliban. He'll explain why right after these messages. Hey, folks, did you know scammers can literally steal your home right out from under you? The FBI calls it house stealing, and it's a growing real estate scam targeting American homeowners. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on one document, use a fake notary stamp, pay a small fee, and file it with your local recorder's office. And just like that, your home title has been transferred out of your name. Then they can take out loans using your equity as collateral or even sell the property behind your back, and you won't even know it's happening until you start getting collections or foreclosure notices months later. So let me ask you, when was the last time you checked your home title lock? If you're like me, the answer is never. And that's exactly what scammers are counting on. That's why I trust Home Title Lock. Their $1 million triple lock protection helps keep your homes and equity safe. Here's what you get. Immediate 24/7 monitoring of your property, urgent alerts if there are any changes, and if fraud should ever happen, their U.S.-based restoration team will spend up to $1 million to fix the fraud and restore your title at no additional cost to you. And here's the best part. I've teamed up with Home Title Lock to give you a free title history report so you can find out if you're already a victim and access to your personal title expert. A $250 value just for signing up. So do this. Go to HometitleLock.com and use my promo code JTN250. That's HometitleLock.com, promo code JTN250 to get the protection and peace of mind you deserve. Welcome back, everybody. Amanda will rejoin us in a second. She had to step out for a little breaking news. We'll tell you about that later. All right. You saw at the top of the show and on Just the News earlier today that a long-held American from Afghanistan was released today. Another major win for the Trump administration and one of its close allies in the Middle East who's been helping out a lot of these things, Qatar. A major win for the entire country. Our next guest, well, he's been working on making sure the current leaders of Afghanistan, those who held this man for a long time, don't continue to benefit from American taxpayers. We're talking about the Taliban, of course. Our next guest from the great state of Tennessee, Congressman Tim Burchett. Congressman, great to have you on the show, sir.
Thank you, John. It's always a pleasure, brother.
We love having you on, and every time you come on, you've got something new. You're digging down, trying to get some common sense things done. I think most Americans would say, wait a second, we're not really funding the Taliban. And the answer is, well, under the Biden administration, we really were. Tell us about your new legislation.
Yes, sir. Well, it just eliminates the funding. What we found out was a guy named Sean Ryan out of Nashville, former Navy SEAL, another guy it goes by the name Legend, who's actually an Afghan, fought for us, fought for freedom for his country, and fought the Taliban. They found out we're sending them $40 million a week, $40 million. Now, we voted for $100 million for Hurricane Helene relief one time, and it was stolen, of course, and sent up to New York to house illegals in expensive apartment buildings. And so you got to figure $40 million a week. We send it to the bank. It's supposed to go to their, injured moms or whatever liberal cause they throw at us, and they don't. They steal it right off the top. I remember Secretary of State Anthony Blinken under Biden said it wasn't happening, and then I called out the numbers in the committee. You all covered it, I remember.
We did.
And then he said, well, it's such a small percentage. And I said, $40 million a week is a small percentage. I said, man, you need to come to Tennessee, brother. $40 million a week is, we could build almost two high schools with that. That's crazy. And then we're doing this, but you multiply it out over other agencies and other things that DOJ is uncovering. I got a feeling it's going to be a lot more than that. We're going to wish it was $40 million a week. And currently right now it's just, the sewer that is Washington. We're having hearings and all this stuff. We need to get the bill out. I've spoke with leadership. I've spoke with our leadership team. And I told them, I'm about ready to come unglued. I said, do not make me do a video on the steps of the Capitol of this thing, or America will get really ticked off, and they should be. Yeah. But anyway, it's to stop that, and it's they'll hate us for free, John. We don't need to be giving them any money, and especially hardworking American taxpayers' money. And we're borrowing that money to give them.
We are. Yeah, and the party who said they stood for women is funding one of the most anti-women regimes in the entire world. The Democratic Party funding the Taliban undercuts everything they claim they stand for when it comes to Me Too and women's rights. Just remarkable. I want to turn to another topic that I've seen you so eloquently address over the last several weeks, and that is these individual judges now handing out temporary restraining orders like they were candy at Halloween. These things used to be the rarest and highest hurdle to clear to get a temporary restraining order or temporary injunction, particularly a nationwide one. Now there have been dozens of them in the last few months. Where is Congress's mind on this? Is there a place for Congress to step in now and consider some judicial reform, maybe create a panel saying no individual judge can enjoin the country? It's got to go to like a panel like the FISA panel.
Exactly. It's, they were shopping around on these things, but this deal, I was talking to somebody who was more of a legal scholar than I am. I've written a lot of laws, but occasionally I have to bring in a lawyer to explain to me exactly, make sure I'm doing what I said I wanted to do. And I think we could even go toward an avenue of disbarring these people, because some of the things they're doing are completely unethical. They have family members that are profiting off of some of these things, and we know this, and it's been documented. And I dare say Elon Musk is following that paper trail, as he told me, and he said it's going right back to Washington, and I guarantee you it is. And yeah, but the problem is, we've got to get the guts to do it. That's the problem. Everybody says, we can't be critical of judges. Well, why not? I've got a First Amendment. They're reaching out into jurisdictions that they've never had control of in the past. And we're supposed to, imagine this. You've got a group of gang members here illegally, murderers, rapists, child trafficking. They took over an apartment complex in Colorado. And they said, well, there's just a couple of complexes. Like, that matters. And so, now you've got judges saying when we're trying to deport these thugs that we can't do it, or trying to say we can't do it. Thank goodness we got a president with the guts to do it, and he has some legal minds behind him. I think that will prevail. But the problem you see is instantaneous when they start this stuff. When they say we got to keep funding USAID, we got to keep doing all this other stuff. That's why it's so important for members of Congress to get some dadgum guts and start filing bills. I've called legal services. So just draw me up a bill that says we defund. We will not send another dollar to USAID. We're not shutting it down. We're just saying we're not going to pay you anymore. And so that needs to be the avenue we take. And unfortunately, there is no conduit for that. They're passing all these things, executive orders, and every one of them they shop around and tie in the federal courts, John. You know what's behind that. It matters who you elect. An Obama appointee that clearly they have some conflicts there. Their wife was involved in some things. Apparently, one of these judges was showing up at some of Trump's other trials, way out of his jurisdiction. Was in the audience watching. Now, what the heck is that about? Yeah. This is an orchestrated thing. We all know it, and the country needs to wake up. And America is overwhelmingly supporting Doge. Yeah, there's going to be some hiccups, some mistakes are going to be made, but it's better than reading about another little girl losing her life at the hands of some thug that's here illegally.
Yeah, we have a story today. Judge Boasberg, that's the one that's in the illegal aliens and the gang members, blocking the gang members from being deported. He was the judge of the FISA court, and he was the guy that gave a sweetheart deal to an FBI lawyer who misled the court in the Russia collusion case. So their histories are pretty front and center now, and I think the American people have caught on. Do you think there's enough appetite to impeach, or maybe is there enough appetite at least to do a reform that keeps judges from doing nationwide injunctions from a small location, maybe a blue city somewhere in America?
I don't think there is. I think I would vote for it. You would vote for it. And what will happen is that they'll come home and say, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And then somebody gets in their ear. You got members that are compromised. And frankly, they just don't have the guts because they ought to be clamoring. If I was an attorney on one of these judicial committees, Jim Jordan can't carry the country on his own back.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's a lot, other lawmakers have to step up and put their money where their mouth is. Another ruling that has a lot of people perplexed, and I think it's actually a security issue from talking to all of the professional security guards. I've talked to prison guards recently. Judges ordering 2 males to be reinstalled into a female prison because they identify as transgender. We've already seen a history of rape and attack on women from males that get put into these prisons. The idea that a judge can tell the Bureau of Prisons what to do seems a little odd to most people, I think.
A lot of the women that are in prison have been abused. I'm just going to step out on a limb there, and then you're exposing them to this. It's another Wokotopia gone wild, and we've got to address this stuff. We got to quit wringing our hands. Again, preachers got to start preaching the gospel, and good conservatives got to quit being afraid to stand up to these people at the water cooler at work, or at the cafeteria, or at their kids' ball game. When you hear somebody saying this filth, that's all it is. It's filth. You need to call it out for what it is. It used to be in this country where men used to. It's horribly sexist and wrong, I'm sure, for some people, but men, they would stand in line to stand up for a woman. Now they're standing in the way of. If a guy goes into a girl's restroom and identifies as a woman, or says he identifies as a woman, oh, that's his right. No, it isn't. It's your right to protect your kid and your wife. And dadgummit, we ought to get some guts and start doing it. And I told my wife many times, I said, honey, if something like that ever goes down, I hope you come visit me in prison, because that's probably where I'll end up.
I don't doubt it one bit. I don't doubt it. About a minute left. I want to ask a little bit, when Congress comes back, what does the process to getting the budget look like, and what do you think are the achievable cuts? By the way, we're on a path to cuts, which is something we haven't been able to say in 30 years, but how big a cut, what is realistically achievable? You're a realist, and I always like that about that.
Yes, sir. I'd say about a half of what everybody's saying, because everybody's compromised. As I've stated many times, their wives and or girlfriends will work somewhere down the line, the food chain on these agencies, And you better start asking people why they don't vote it, why they don't support it, why they don't sign on these bills, and why are they ducking out committee meetings when they should be in there fighting for these things. That's what you're going to have to start. I've said this many times. I told Marjorie Taylor Greene this. She and I were talking. I said, our problem's not going to be the Marxists across the aisle. It's going to be within this room. Within this room, it's going to be within our own party. We better wake up. We better start supporting this president, or we will never get another shot, and we will lose this country.
Current House plan has $2 trillion saved over 10 years. That'd be about $200 billion. Are you thinking $100 billion is the real number?
I don't know. We run up $1 trillion every 100 days in debt. So I think you better look at. Yeah, it sounds like a lot, but we better start. They need to go through the Department of Education. They better go through that Pentagon and quit building stuff we don't need, antiquated systems that are going to be mothballed the day they're made. And look whose districts they're made in. Yeah. That's where the deal's going down, and we better start paying attention.
Yeah, from your lips to God's ears is what a lot of people are thinking as they listen to you speak today. Congressman, as always, such a great honor to have you on. Always a fount of wisdom and common sense. Great to have you on the show today.
Thank you, John. See you, Brian.
Thank you so much. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the possibility of a ceasefire in Ukraine. It's getting closer. There's still some leaps that have to be taken, but we'll bring you up to speed on that right after these messages. Hey folks, are you a yo-yo dieter? You diet, you lose weight, and then you gain it back, plus a few extra, right? You know how that goes. You lose it again, and you regain it. It's a bad cycle, right? It's dangerous, actually. Studies show that yo-yo dieting can increase your risk of heart attack, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and other health problems. It's a real concern. Breaking free of your yo-yo diet pattern is a main reason doctors created Lean. Lean is a supplement, not an injection, and you don't need a prescription for it. The science behind Lean is impressive. It's studied natural ingredients, target weight loss in 3 powerful ways. Lean helps maintain healthy blood sugar. That's important. It helps control appetite. That's important. And it helps burn fat by converting fat into energy. Listen, if you're tired of losing weight and getting it all back, if you want to lose meaningful weight at a healthy pace, Lean was created just for you. Let me get you started with 20% off when you enter JustNews20 at TakeLean.com. That's the code JustNews20 at TakeLean.com to save 20%. Go check it out.
back to Just the News, No Noise. President Trump has spoken to Russia's Vladimir Putin and Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky in the last few days about implementing a ceasefire in that war, first focused on protecting energy and infrastructure. And if that can be reached, then hopefully we can get to a full termination in the fighting. Joining us now to discuss just how likely a ceasefire is, former CIA operations officer, founder and president of Lopez Liberty LLC, and also a founding member of the Citizens Commission on National Security, Claire Lopez. Claire, it's an honor to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, John. Glad to be with you both.
Yeah, good to have you.
Delighted to have you. You know, a few days ago from the press podium, the press secretary said that we are on the 10-yard line. Now, for an offense that is not great in the red zone, I don't know what that says, but it seems like it was a good thing. What do you anticipate is the reality?
Well, I do think that we're in the beginning stages, probably, of what's going to be a multi-stage discussion. We know, as you said, that President Trump has spoken individually with both President Vladimir Putin of Russia and Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine. There is a apparent agreement about a partial ceasefire in effect right now. That partial ceasefire to include stopping from both sides attacks against the other side's infrastructure elements. This would be things like electric power stations, water pumping stations, and importantly, the very big nuclear reactor site at Zaporizhia in southern Ukraine. So that was offered by the White House. Ukraine and Zelensky accepted it, but rather than just accept it straight up, it seems that President Putin of Russia has attached conditions to include a complete cessation of all aid to Ukraine from the West, from the United States, insisting upon elections in Ukraine, which are completely against the Ukrainian constitution, which ban basically elections during time of war, martial law. And other conditions that Putin apparently is trying to insert before agreeing to even this beginning or maybe intermediate step towards a ceasefire.
Yeah, that's a great catalog of where things are. What would Putin's motive be? Right now, he's starting to win the land war. He certainly has the advantage in a war of attrition. What would be some of the motivations for Putin to take some form of a deal? Is it to get back in the good graces of Europe, or is there something else behind this?
I would think more that what Putin is seeking is just a delay mechanism to drag things out while, for example, his Russian troops make progress in the Kursk Oblast that the Ukrainian forces entered and took part of, control of last year, being pushed backwards now. I think that Putin is trying to appear to be willing to discuss, but still sticking to his absolutely maximalist claims against Ukraine. Again, as we said, no more Western aid, elections, which are against the Constitution, and that he, Putin, Russia, be allowed to keep whatever occupied territory that they have conquered in the 3 years that this war has been going on now, before any ceasefire lines are actually drawn.
Claire, I want to ask you about some of the rattling that's happening in other European nations, indications that they say that they can't trust the United States after all of this. Do you think there's any truth to that, or are they just trying to needle?
Well, I think they are rightfully concerned. I mean, after that dust-up at the White House Oval Office some 3 or so weeks ago between President Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and, of course, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and others were there present, too, as well as the media. After that, I think that the progress, as seen from the European perspective, was at least stymied. Was delayed, if not stopped. Now, we may think that President Trump, and perhaps this is what he's doing, is using these kinds of statements, these kinds of, we're cutting off your aid, we're cutting off your intelligence to Ukraine, using that as a way to perhaps prod European countries to step up and actually do more in the way of providing aid to Ukraine, which they've been doing on a massive scale. But also, it has prodded, apparently, the European countries, including many of NATO, to talk about a European military force that would be somehow separate from NATO, as they are concerned that maybe the United States under President Trump would even withdraw from NATO. Not doing that now, but they're concerned that could happen. So in a way, President Trump's statements have prodded the Europeans to take more defensive steps in their own defense. The Baltic states, for example, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, are on a war footing. They've called up reserves, sent troops to their borders with Kaliningrad, which is Russian. Poland, for example, has just instituted military training for all high school students. That's how seriously they take Vladimir Putin's threats if ever, he is successful in taking over Ukraine.
Well, we look forward to the next update on this so that we can have another conversation with you about it. Claire Lopez, former CIA operations officer. Everybody go check out her organization. Thank you so much, Claire. All right, everybody, federal judges keep blocking President Trump from actually cutting wasteful spending. We'll talk about that after this. Welcome back, everybody. A federal judge on Tuesday temporarily blocked the Environmental Protection Agency from canceling over $20 billion in Biden-era climate grants, despite mounting concerns over waste, fraud, and political favoritism. And the ruling is a setback for the Trump administration's efforts to restore fiscal responsibility and prevent taxpayer dollars from being funneled into unaccountable green slush funds. Under EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, the agency has been working to expose and eliminate reckless spending programs pushed by the previous administration. So joining me now to talk about all of this and how important it is that the government actually finds a way to slash the spending is founder of HagenCapital.com. Also, he's an investor and an author, Chadwick Hagan. Chadwick, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You know, when I look at the climate initiatives of the Biden administration, I feel like the pinnacle example was the, what was it, $5 billion that went towards 500,000 EV charging stations, and I think 57 or 58 ended up getting built. Considering that track record on the green agenda, I feel like the EPA is in a really great position to get rid of this, but alas, the judge blocked it. What do you think will happen next?
Yeah, I'm really glad that Zeldin's, Lee Zeldin, is the EPA administrator. I think he'll do a lot of good. It's definitely surprising that a judge has recently blocked his recent maneuvers, and we'll just have to see. I imagine this will play out in court. I mean, I think Lee's doing the right thing, like we all do. There's a tremendous amount of waste and grift going to the Democrats Party climate/green agenda, and there's a lot more that can be done for the environment other than just kind of like filling up the pockets of cronies.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel that way, Chadwick. There is inherent in these early judges' rulings blocking DOGE from saving people taxpayer money, that when Congress sets a budget, it's the ceiling you must abide to, not the floor. And I think President Trump seems to think, well, just because you appropriate doesn't mean I have to spend all of it. I'll spend what makes sense for the American people. Has that issue ever been resolved, or do you think that's where the Supreme Court ultimately will have to decide between?
No, I think the Supreme Court will have to come in for that one. It's just Washington's addicted to spending money and having tons of waste, and I think SCOTUS is gonna play the part for that one.
Yeah, makes sense.
Is there a chess move that you can see on the board that puts Democrats in a position where they have to support what DOGE is doing?
That's a really good question. I don't know. The backlash against DOGE is really interesting because from a businessman's perspective, all of this efficiency that's being forced down the pipe is obviously a really good thing. And right now they're kind of like, destroying Tesla cars and going after Tesla dealerships, if that's what you call them, Tesla sales centers. And that in itself is very much an anti-environmental move, kind of lighting things on fire and just criminality. So I would imagine, if we kind of zoom out and look at this kind of like larger theory that maybe the Democrats in office realize how unpopular the Democratic Party is, and they start supporting some of DOGE's methods and get behind it. Because it's completely partisan. Like the hate towards DOGE is completely partisan right now.
Yeah, it's not based on the merit.
I think it's really tough to argue if you have just a bit of common sense that what DOGE is doing is a positive. I mean, it's really hard to argue against that.
Yeah. Chadwick, I'm going to ask, as you make investment decisions and you're a businessman, the influx of capital to the United States that's been announced since Donald Trump was elected. You've got Taiwan, Japan, Honda coming back from Mexico into the United States, and today NVIDIA announcing hundreds of billions of dollars of new infrastructure investment in the United States. Does that get the capital on the sidelines in America that's been worried about inflation excited? How will corporate America and investment America respond to these early commitments that are being made to President Trump?
Well, look, in many ways, America is the only game in town. We're the strongest domestic economy in the world, and the world knows this. If you watch the currency markets during COVID, the Japanese yen and the Swiss franc have always been safe haven currencies. The dollar became the dominant safe haven currency. I think it was obvious that the Biden administration and the rules and regulations and just kind of the overall vibe of that administration was wonky and zany and upside down. It wasn't very business friendly. With Trump in office, across the world, businessmen and investors realize that America's back, if you want to say that, right? So I definitely believe that we'll continue to have international investment coming to America, especially if Trump and his administration goes after the tax code, which would be a wonderful thing. I've worked on different fiscal policy initiatives for years. And one thing that international investors are always worried about is the blowback from taxes and having to pay these erroneous tax penalties. So with Trump in office, with his extended team, which are all really capable and really kind of incredible individuals, if we had a maneuver with taxes, I think we would have so much money coming into America, we wouldn't know what to do with it.
Wow. That's amazing.
Well, we are now in the trillions when it comes to reinvestments and investments and repatriation of businesses back into this country. So it's a new day, and I think that this is going to continue throughout the next 3.5 years. Chadwick Hagan, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, coming up, fluoride. It is a big conversation in the woo-woo Maha movement. We're going to talk about that next. Welcome back to the final segment of the show. I'm really glad that we are going to end the show tonight with this conversation. It is a controversial topic, the topic of fluoride in drinking water, because the Maha movement has put this front and center. So should it be removed from our drinking water, like it has in a lot of other European countries? So joining us now to talk about that is Texas-based dentist Dr. Dave Frank. Dr. Frank, thanks so much for being here.
Good evening. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on this evening.
Likewise. And I think 5 years ago, I wouldn't have even considered the issue of fluoride in water controversial. I was fine with it being in my water. I was fine with it being in my toothpaste. And then I learned that there were some issues surrounding kids' IQs and possibly endocrine disruption. Tell us about it.
Sure. Fluoride has been a great thing for a very long time, especially here in America. Fluoride has been out for a public health initiative since the end of World War II. Mm-hmm. And really the intention of fluoride was to be able to give those underserved communities that just were on well water, that had really no access to other types of dental health, dental preventive health, on giving kids more specifically a fighting chance. As a tooth develops and grows, we're looking at mineralization processes, calcification processes. And sadly, as a small child, our teeth are much softer and it takes time for them to harden up. So the public health initiative of putting fluoride in our drinking water was great. It was a really smart plan. But as the decades have evolved over the years, fluoride is really in a whole lot of other products just besides our drinking water, especially if you're seeing your dentist routinely. Not only are we getting fluoride in toothpaste, we can get prescription fluoride toothpaste. We can have fluoride in rinses. Believe it or not, some of the soft drinks that we drink daily have fluoride in it because of the water source of where the soft drink companies are getting their water from. So the concern comes down to play of how much of fluoride do we need? And more importantly, could there be too much fluoride? And right now in America, we're really at a safer level of water fluoridation, being at about 0.75 milligrams per liter. The concern is once we're getting above 1.5 milligrams per liter, as other countries that have done research on this, like China and Mexico and Brazil, we're finding out there may be some cognitive impairment, cognitive defects, and really kind of a lowering of a child's IQ if there's too much fluoride consumed. So where this comes to impact for America is about how do we know how much we're getting, and are we having too much? I don't think it's a crisis if you're having some occasional tap water from time to time. But if you're having all of these other ancillary types of fluoride with prescription fluoride toothpastes, fluoride mouth rinses, nursery water, fluoride tablets, drinking out of tap water, you may start to be getting into higher doses and levels. And I think that's just our general concern right now in America is finding out where these public health policies still today as important as their good intentions from back in the late 1940s.
Really well explained. Yeah. Sir, two things have happened. Obviously, Europe is on a different path than us right now. They're already on the reversal path. And then recently, a federal judge ruled in America that the EPA has got to get involved and start looking at whether the risk. Referee both of those risks, because they seem to be the two biggest events in this debate recently.
Right. And I really think we need to look at, from fluoride, what are we expecting to achieve out of this? I think as opposed to having these initiatives of how much fluoride we're having in our water sources and whether or not we need to be cutting that down, I do think we need to be mindful of that. We need to get to the bigger source of what's happening in our American diet. It's as if we're using these platforms and using bureaucracy to dictate how much fluoride we need, as opposed to let's avoid the amount of processed foods, let's avoid the amount of simple sugars, let's avoid the amount of acidity that's already in our American diet so that we're not using fluoride as a crux. Almost to say that like fluoride could be considered like an Ozempic for dieting. No, it's about having the right food consumption. Yeah. It's about lowering your sugar content so we don't have to be worried about cavities. Yeah. Because the road to hell is often paved with good intentions.
That's very true.
Indeed. And that's pretty much the path to Washington as well. Before we let you go, I want to ask you, if we do get rid of fluoride in water, it's my understanding that using fluoride topically is better anyway. So if we get rid of the fluoride in the water, is using it in toothpaste good enough?
I think so. Absolutely. I don't think there was a time before fluoride existed in the water, and we all weren't dying of major dental abscesses, and we all weren't walking around as dental cripples. The main thing that has really made dentistry and our problems with our oral health has been impacted by our sugar consumption.
Right.
Ease off on the sugars and you're going to find a whole host of benefits, to include a much healthier mouth.
Absolutely.
Having a toothbrush topically placed with some fluoride and floss and avoiding sugar consumption is going to put you on a right path, no matter how much fluoride is in our public water supply.
Winning combination. Dr. Dave Frank, thank you so much for being here, sir. Thanks for your wisdom on all of that. And that's going to do it for us tonight. We'll be back here tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for joining us. See you then.